The stars looked cold and distant, like silent watchers that no longer cared for the lives below them. Across the battlefield, the last defenders waited in the shadow of a dying world. Their fleets were broken, their ships carried scars from too many battles, their fuel was low, their weapons almost empty. They had once believed in hope. They had once believed someone would come, but now, that belief was gone. The enemy had surrounded them. An endless sea of alien warships filled the sky, their shapes dark against the glow of the planet below. Cruisers, dreadnoughts, and carriers of them spread across the void like predators circling a wounded prey. Every escape route was blocked, every path home was cut off. On the bridge of one of the last human-allied ships, silence pressed down on the crew. No one spoke, no one wanted to say what they were all thinking. There would be no rescue. They had sent messages weeks ago, calls for help, pleas to their allies, even desperate signals to the stars, hoping some distant friend might hear. But the galaxy had answered with silence. There was no movement, no reinforcement, no promise. Only the enemy, tightening their grip like a fist around their throats. One young officer whispered to herself, almost too quiet to be heard, "No help is coming." Her captain heard her, but he did not correct her. He could not, because deep down, he believed the same. The enemy had planned this moment carefully. They wanted the defenders not only to be destroyed, but to feel abandoned. They wanted them to know that no one cared, that no one would fight for them, that humanity and its allies were forgotten. On enemy channels, mocking voices filled the void. Alien commanders laughed as they broadcast their taunts across open frequencies. "Your signals are dust in the void. No one will come for you. Your cries are a song of weakness. This is the end. Watch as the galaxy forgets your name." The defenders heard these words, and each syllable felt like a blade. Morale was falling apart. Soldiers who had once stood proud now stared blankly at their screens. Engineers who had once believed in miracles now sat in silence, their tools resting useless in their hands. Even the captains, hardened by years of war, could no longer promise victory to their crews. Above the planet, the alien fleet began to shift. Their ships moved with slow precision, forming lines that glittered with weapons. Massive cannons turned toward the last defenders. Missiles were armed. Fighters swarmed like insects waiting for the kill. The defenders knew what came next. The enemy would not rush. They would drag it out, enjoying every scream, every fireball in the sky, every final cry for help. They wanted to break not just ships, but spirits. A soldier on the ground looked up at the night sky, watching as streaks of enemy ships cut across the stars. His hands trembled as he gripped his rifle. "No help," he whispered, alone. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a spark refused to die. Not everyone had given in to despair. Some still searched the void, their scanners tuned to the faintest signals. Some still whispered prayers, sending their words to the stars, even if no one answered. And some still remembered the one truth about humanity: they never surrendered. Quietly. But at that moment, with the enemy fleet filling the skies and their weapons charging, hope was a fragile thing. It felt too small, too weak, too far away. The alien commanders smiled on their bridges. Their voices rang out once more. "You will die forgotten. You will die alone." And the defenders believed it. The atmosphere was heavy with silence and fear. Crews sat at their stations, waiting for the end. Some closed their eyes, refusing to watch. Some clutched photos of their families, holding on to one last memory before the void claimed them. Others simply stared at the stars, wondering how long it would take before the enemy's fire turned them into dust. Time seemed to slow. Every second stretched into an eternity. The planet below glowed faintly, its surface scarred from battles already lost. The sky above was filled with shadows, enemy ships closing in like walls of iron. The defenders whispered one final truth to each other: "No help is coming." It was the thought that bound them all together in that last moment. They were the forgotten, they were the abandoned. The galaxy had left them to die, and as the enemy's weapons began to glow, preparing to unleash fire that would wipe them out, the defenders braced themselves for the end. But far beyond the reach of their scanners, hidden deep within the silence of the void, something stirred, something vast, something powerful, something human. The enemy fleet moved with cruel patience, their warships forming walls of steel around the last defenders. Engines burned like cold suns, thrusters cutting across the void in precise lines. It was a dance of predators circling prey. Each ship slid into position, sealing every possible escape route until there was nowhere left to run. On the human-allied bridges, the silence was broken only by the steady hum of failing systems. Screens flickered, consoles blinked weakly. Some ships had only half their weapons online, others barely had enough fuel to maneuver. Their commanders knew the truth. This battle was already lost. The alien leaders understood this too, and they savored it. Across the channels, their voices oozed with arrogance. "Your struggle is over," one alien admiral said, his voice deep and sharp like broken glass. "No reinforcements, no allies. The galaxy has turned its back on you." Another voice joined in, colder, mocking. "Humanity sends no ships. They are too weak, too afraid. You are nothing but a message to the stars that resistance ends here." Every defender heard those words, and the weight of despair grew heavier. A few clenched their fists, rage smoldering in their eyes, but most sat still, hearts sinking, convinced this was the end. The enemy's strategy was clear: destroy hope before destroying ships. On one command deck, an old captain stood straight, his weathered face bathed in the dim glow of dying lights. He said nothing as the enemy taunted them, but his eyes were fixed on the black horizon. For reasons he could not explain, he kept staring into the void beyond the enemy's lines, as if something might appear. His crew noticed and exchanged uneasy glances. None of them said it aloud, but they were all thinking the same. There was nothing out there, and yet, something felt different. The scanners began to twitch. At first it was faint, a whisper of static. Operators frowned, adjusting controls, thinking it was another system failure. But then it came again, an irregular pulse, a reading that shouldn't exist. "Interference," one officer asked. Perhaps another replied, shaking their head. "But it doesn't match any of their signals, it's something else." The crew leaned closer, watching the strange flicker on their displays. The signal was small, almost invisible, but steady, pulsing from the darkness beyond enemy formations. The captain's lips curled into the faintest smile. "Hold on," he whispered. The enemy noticed it too. Their scanners picked up the same distortion. On alien bridges, officers barked reports, their tones uneasy. Unidentified readings in Sector 7. Distance unknown, possibly debris. The admirals dismissed it at first. Ignore it. Their systems were broken. Ghost signals from failing equipment. But the signal grew stronger. The pulse echoed again, louder, clearer, until even the most skeptical eyes could no longer deny it. Something was out there, hidden in the darkness. The alien commanders stiffened. Orders rang out. Increase scans. Lock sensors on that sector. Nothing enters this space without our knowledge. Their fleets shifted, forming tighter ranks, weapons, adjusting nervously toward the void. Mockery faded into silence. Where there had been arrogance, there was now unease. The defenders noticed the change. They looked at one another, confusion spreading through their decks. Their hearts, once crushed by despair, flickered with something dangerous. Not yet hope, but curiosity. "What is it?" whispered a young officer. The old captain's voice was low, steady. "It's not debris." The signal pulsed again, stronger than before. The scanners screamed warnings now, unable to process the energy readings. Numbers jumped, flashing red across the screens. The alien admirals shouted for answers. Their officers stammered, unable to explain. "Power output unknown, mass unknown. It's impossible to measure." And then, for a moment, everything went still. The pulse vanished. Silence returned. The scanners fell quiet as if nothing had been there at all. The defenders felt their hearts drop. Was it a trick? Had their systems betrayed them again? The faint spark of curiosity was smothered, replaced by the heavy weight of disappointment. The alien admirals smirked once more, their confidence returning. "Ghost readings," one said. "The humans cling to shadows, hoping for miracles." But before the laughter could spread again, the void itself tore open. A blinding flash ripped across the horizon, brighter than any star, flooding every screen, every window, every eye. Space shuddered as if the universe itself had been struck. Ships rocked violently, their systems overwhelmed by the sudden surge of energy. And then it appeared. From the heart of the light, a massive shape emerged, engines roaring like thunder, trails of blazing blue fire burning behind it. A warship, colossal, unstoppable, burst into reality. Its hull gleamed with steel and light, its presence dwarfing the stars themselves. The defenders froze. Their mouths fell open, their despair cracked, replaced by shock. The alien admirals stood silent, their laughter dying on their tongues. The human warship had come. It had roared out of the void like an answer to every prayer, every desperate signal, every final whisper of hope. For a moment, the entire galaxy held its breath. The warship tore through the void, its massive frame glowing against the black sea of stars. It was not just large, it was enormous. A floating fortress that seemed to carry the weight of an entire world on its back. Its engines blazed blue and white, sending ripples of energy across the battlefield. For the defenders, it was like watching a star being born. For the enemy, it was like staring at something they could not understand. The ship's arrival was no accident. It came with purpose, sliding into the heart of the battlefield as if it belonged there, fearless and unshaken. Its hull shimmered with strange light, patterns of glowing lines racing across the metal skin. Every panel of armor looked alive, breathing with power, defying the cold emptiness around it. On the bridges of the defenders, crews stood frozen, eyes wide. Some whispered prayers. Others wept openly, not from fear this time, but from relief. For so long they had believed no help was coming. Now, before their eyes, help had arrived in the form of a warship that defied imagination. On enemy ships, silence ruled. Admirals who had mocked humanity now leaned forward in their command chairs, jaws tight, eyes narrow. They had expected nothing, a desperate shuttle, a weak escort at best. But this was something else entirely. One alien officer whispered to his commander, "It is human." The commander sneered, masking unease. "Yes, but it is still only one." The statement rippled through the fleets like a reminder. Yes, the ship was vast. Yes, it glowed with strange power. But it was still alone, facing thousands. Numbers were on their side, weapons were on their side, and arrogance crept back into their voices. "All guns to bear," one admiral ordered. Across the alien fleets, weapons shifted, cannons turned, missiles armed, fighters swarmed into formation. They would crush this warship quickly, before it could strike fear deeper into their ranks. But then the human ship moved. It did not creep forward like a lumbering giant. It glided with grace, smooth and calm, as if it were dancing in the void. Its engines pulsed in a steady rhythm, echoing like a heartbeat across the scanners of every ship nearby. With each pulse, the energy surrounding it grew stronger, brighter, almost alive. The defenders gasped. They could feel it even through their screens, through the metal of their ships, through the silence of the void. This was not just a machine. This was something more. The enemy hesitated. For the first time, hesitation cracked their perfect formations. Some captains barked for orders again. Others shouted in anger, trying to mask the cold edge of fear creeping into their voices. The warship's hull continued to shift, glowing patterns spreading wider, brighter. Symbols no one recognized etched themselves into the metal, shining like fire across the ship's surface. It was as though the vessel itself was alive, responding to the presence of its enemies, preparing itself for war. The defenders watched in awe. For a moment they forgot their own weakness. For a moment they believed again. And then the voice came. It cut across every channel, clear and calm, spoken in human tongue but carried in every language at once. "You thought no help was coming, but humanity has arrived." The word spread across the battlefield, touching every ship, every soldier, every commander. They rang louder than the engines, louder than the weapons charging in the distance. The enemy reacted with fury, fire. An admiral roared. Thousands of weapons lit the void, beams and missiles rushing forward in a storm of firepower. The warship was swallowed by the light, explosions bursting across its form, shockwaves tearing through the silence. The battlefield shook as the combined might of entire fleets struck down upon one target. For a long moment, nothing could be seen. Defenders held their breath. Enemy admirals smirked with satisfaction. But as the light faded, the warship remained, not broken, not even scarred. Its hull glowed brighter, absorbing the energy that had tried to destroy it. The glowing lines pulsed with renewed strength, veins of fire racing faster, bolder, more alive than before. Gasps echoed across both fleets. Crews froze at their stations. Fighters wavered in formation. And then the warship moved again. It surged forward, its engines roaring, the glow of its body spreading across the void. Every movement was confident, unstoppable. It was not the prey. It was the predator. The defenders erupted with cries of hope. Tears turned into cheers. Hearts that had been crushed by despair now beat faster with pride. The enemy, however, felt the opposite. Their laughter was gone. Their arrogance burned away in the face of something they could not destroy. One ship, one human warship. And yet, it was enough to make the galaxy tremble. The warship floated in the center of the battlefield, glowing like a star surrounded by shadows. The enemy had thrown their full fury at it. Thousands of beams and missiles that could have shattered entire moons, and yet, it still stood, untouched, radiant, alive. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. On the bridges of alien fleets, commanders stared at their screens, jaws tight, unable to believe what they saw. Some shouted that it was a trick, that their scanners lied. Others screamed at their crews to fire again, to keep shooting until nothing remained. But no one could shake the truth. Their weapons had done nothing. The defenders, frozen only moments ago, now leaned forward, eyes wide with awe. They whispered to each other, as if afraid their voices would break the spell. It survived. It's still there. It didn't even flinch. For the first time in what felt like forever, hope spread like fire through their veins. Then the warship spoke again. The voice was steady, calm, but it carried weight like thunder. It reached every channel, every frequency, every ship. We are humanity. We do not break. We do not surrender. We arrive. The words were simple, but they struck deeper than any weapon. They made the defenders' hearts race. They made the enemy's hands tremble. The warship began to move. Slowly, at first, gliding forward with impossible grace, its thrusters burning brighter. Patterns of golden light raced across its hull, glowing stronger with every passing second. The ship pulsed with power, as if alive, as if the void itself bent to its will. Enemy fleets scrambled to react. Commands echoed through the chaos. Regroup. Hold formation. Do not let it through. Fighters swarmed forward in waves, their engines screaming as they closed in on the colossal vessel. Cruisers turned their cannons. Dreadnoughts, prepared to unleash another storm. The human ship did not stop. Its hull shifted, armor plates sliding open with mechanical precision. From within, weapons unfolded, strange, glowing instruments of war, unlike anything seen before. They did not look like missiles or cannons. They looked alive, humming with a rhythm that matched the heartbeat of the ship itself. The enemy fighters reached first. They darted around the warship, unleashing a storm of rapid-fire beams and plasma bursts. The void lit up with their fury, but the human vessel answered not with shields, but with something else. A pulse. It rippled outward, invisible at first, then glowing faintly with golden light. Every fighter caught in its wave shuddered. Engines died, weapons flickered, controls went dark. One by one, the swarm of enemy fighters fell silent, drifting helplessly into the void. Gasps erupted across the battlefield. On alien command decks, officers shouted in disbelief, "Our systems are dead. The fighters are unresponsive." What did it do? The defenders could only stare, their eyes wide. The warship had not fired a single bullet. It had simply pulsed, and entire squadrons had been erased from the fight. Then the ship revealed its true weapons. From its glowing seams, beams of focused energy shot outward, sharp and precise. Each strike found its mark: an enemy cruiser, a carrier, a battleship. Hand cut through their hulls as if they were made of paper. Explosions bloomed in the void, fiery blossoms that tore apart formations and sent shockwaves across the stars. Enemies shouted for countermeasures, desperate to strike back. More fleets surged forward, more weapons unleashed their wrath. But every shot bent away, scattered by invisible distortions around the human vessel. Beams curved into the void, missiles detonated harmlessly, energy dissolved into nothing. Still, the warship advanced. Its presence was overwhelming, like a mountain walking through fire, unstoppable, undeniable. The defenders, once moments away from death, now watched as their enemies faltered. They saw the fear spreading in alien eyes, the hesitation in their voices, the cracks in their arrogance. The human voice came again, calm and unbroken. Thought no help would come, but humanity never abandons its own. The words echoed like prophecy. The defenders felt their despair shatter, replaced with fierce pride. They raised their voices, cheering, weeping, clenching their fists. They were no longer forgotten. They were no longer alone. The enemy tried one last coordinated strike. Dreadnoughts aligned their cannons. Carriers launched everything they had left, and the battlefield filled with fire once more. But the warship was faster. Its engines roared, bending space around it, and it surged through the storm like lightning through clouds. Another pulse erupted, brighter this time, shaking the entire battlefield. Enemy ships cracked apart, their shields collapsing, their systems failing. Carriers went dark, cruisers split into fragments. Even the mighty dreadnoughts shuddered, their lights dying as silence claimed them. The defenders could hardly believe what they were seeing. The strongest fleet in the galaxy, the same armada that had mocked them, that had promised to erase them, was being torn apart by one ship. And yet, the warship showed restraint. It did not vaporize every vessel. Many ships were disabled, left drifting instead of destroyed. It was as if humanity wanted the galaxy to witness, to remember, not just their power, but their choice. When the last wave of enemy fire died away, the void grew quiet once more. Only wreckage and silence remained, lit by the glow of the human warship that still hovered strong, its light shining brighter than ever. The defenders whispered the truth to themselves, words that spread through their fleets like fire. Help came, and in that moment, they knew the galaxy would never laugh at humanity again. The void was no longer still, where once the enemy's fleet had stood in flawless lines. Now only chaos remained. Wreckage drifted in glowing fragments, fireballs spread like dying stars, and disabled ships spun helplessly. Yet even in ruin, the enemy did not retreat. Their commanders screamed for one last effort, their voices trembling with rage and fear. Reform the lines, one admiral barked, his scaled hands striking the console. Bring everything to bear, it bleeds, it must bleed. Across the surviving fleets, engines roared, cruisers pulled into shaky formations, carriers launched the rest of their reserves, and dreadnoughts charged their massive cannons. It was no longer about pride or conquest. It was desperation, raw and blind. The defenders watched in silence. They no longer feared what came next. Their eyes were fixed on the warship, glowing brighter than ever, hovering at the center of the void like a second sun. For them, the fight was no longer about survival, it was about witnessing. They had been abandoned, forgotten, but now they were watching history itself unfold. The human ship pulsed again, energy veins crawling across its hull, the patterns alive and shifting. It did not retreat. It surged forward, engines flaring so bright they left trails of burning light across the stars. The enemy's fire came first. A storm of beams, plasma, and missiles filled the battlefield, a wall of destruction that no vessel should endure. It crashed into the human warship with the force of a collapsing sun. Explosions blossomed across its silhouette, shockwaves rippling outward, shaking even distant ships. For a moment the enemy believed, they shouted, triumphant. Voices raw with desperation turned into hope. It's breaking. We have it now. But then the fire cleared. The warship still stood. Not only intact but stronger. Its hull glowed as if it had absorbed the fury, veins of golden light running hotter, brighter, sharper. Where the enemy had given everything humanity had taken, its hand made it fuel. On alien bridges, silence fell. Despair replaced their cheers. For the first time, commanders who had mocked humanity felt terror clawing at their hearts. And then the warship answered. Its core flared, brighter than any star, and a massive pulse exploded outward. It was not just energy, it was raw force that bent the void itself. Enemy formations shattered instantly. Fighters lost power, spinning out of control. Cruisers split apart, their armor peeling like paper. Entire dreadnoughts went silent, their lights dying as the pulse ripped through their systems. The battlefield burned. From the sides of the warship, new weapons unfolded, massive structures that glowed like molten wings. Arcs of lightning leaped across the void, weaving nets of fire that trapped enemy ships. Any vessel caught inside convulsed, their shields collapsing, their hulls splitting under invisible pressure. It was not just destruction, it was domination. The defenders gasped, their voices trembling. It's alive, one whispered. That ship, it's alive. It was hard to argue. The warship did not fight like a machine. It fought like a predator, deliberate and precise. It moved with grace, twisting through the void, every strike chosen, every blow absolute. The enemy tried to regroup again, but fear had already taken root. Captains shouted conflicting orders. Formations broke apart, and ships collided as they scrambled to escape. The once proud armada, the strongest fleet the galaxy had ever gathered, was unraveling before the eyes of the universe. And still, the warship showed restraint. Many vessels were disabled, left drifting in silence rather than destroyed. It could have annihilated them all, but it chose not to. Instead, it made them watch as their fleets fell apart, as their power meant nothing, as humanity's arrival rewrote the laws of war. Across the galaxy, billions watched the live feeds. Civilians who had laughed at humanity fell silent. Children who had been told the humans were weak stared wide-eyed at the glowing ship. Leaders who had mocked them now felt dread rising in their throats. And everywhere, the same question spread, like fire. If this is one ship, what happens when they send more? The warship advanced through the wreckage, unstoppable, unbroken. Its voice rang out once more, calm and steady, echoing across the battlefield. You thought no help was coming, but we are here. Humanity stands, humanity fights, humanity endures. The words carried weight heavier than any weapon. The defenders sobbed with relief, their voices rising in cheers. The enemy, hearing the same words, felt their courage collapse. Another surge of energy flared from the warship, and the last great wave of enemy resistance fell apart. Carriers exploded, dreadnoughts cracked open, fighters scattered into the void. What had once been the pride of empires was now debris, drifting silently around the glowing human vessel. When the fire faded, only silence remained. The human warship floated among the ruins, radiant, eternal, untouchable. Around it, the wreckage of thousands of enemy ships drifted like ashes in the wind. The defenders, who had waited for death only hours before, now stared in awe at the one ship that had changed everything. And across the galaxy, no one laughed at humanity anymore. The battlefield was no longer a clash of equals, it was a graveyard. Thousands of alien ships, once a wall of unstoppable power, now drifted broken and silent across the void. Fires burned in the darkness, glowing fragments spinning like embers of a dying flame. The defenders, who had braced themselves for death, floated in stunned silence, hardly able to breathe. The warship still hovered at the center, glowing brighter than any star. Its vast hull pulsed with golden light, alive with energy. It did not need to move now, it simply existed, and its existence alone was enough to bend the will of every fleet around it. On alien command bridges, despair ruled. Admirals who had once mocked humanity now shouted in rage, trying to command order. Their voices cracked as they hurled desperate orders. Hold your ground. Reform the lines. This is only one ship. But their crews no longer believed. Fear had hollowed their voices, and hesitation broke their fleets apart. Captains abandoned formations. Pilots broke ranks. Some screamed for retreat, others fell silent, too frozen to act. Across the armada, discipline collapsed. The human vessel moved again, but not to chase. It glided slowly through the wreckage, its engines burning with calm power, its presence like a storm cloud drifting across the battlefield. It passed shattered cruisers and burning carriers, ignoring the ruined ships it had already disabled. There was no need to finish them, they had already been defeated. And that restraint terrified the enemy more than destruction. If humanity had wanted, the fleets could have been erased completely, but they weren't. They were left alive to witness to. Remember, the voice of the warship echoed once more, steady and calm, carrying across every channel. You came with arrogance, you came with numbers, but power is not in numbers. Power is in will. Humanity does not flee. Humanity does not surrender. We are here. The words cut deeper than any beam. Defenders cheered, voices breaking with emotion, their hope reborn. Enemy soldiers, however, felt the truth sink like a blade into their hearts. Some admirals refused to accept it. With trembling hands, they slammed their fists against consoles and screamed for their crews to fight. This is only one ship cannot stand against us. But even as they spoke, their screens showed the reality: their fleets in ruin, their forces scattered, their pride burned away. A dreadnought captain whispered the words no one dared say aloud, "We cannot win." And once spoken, it spread like fire. Across the remaining ships, retreat began. Engines ignited, fleets turned, formations shattered completely as vessels raced to escape the battlefield. Entire squadrons fled without orders. Dreadnoughts that had once stood unshakable now limped away, their massive hulls glowing with scars. The defenders watched in disbelief. They had expected annihilation. Instead, they were watching the strongest armada the galaxy had ever seen break apart and run. The human warship did not pursue. It let them go. Its engines hummed with steady power, its hull still glowing, but it remained calm, a lone sentinel in the ruins. On alien worlds, the live broadcasts continued. Billions of civilians who had laughed at humanity now sat in silence, eyes wide, breath held. They had mocked the idea of one human ship. Now they had seen it with their own eyes, a single vessel breaking fleets that had crushed entire star systems. Leaders of empires sat frozen in their chambers, their arrogance crumbling. They had believed humanity was a joke, a weak species, unworthy of respect. Now they knew the truth. And the truth was terrifying. Back on the defenders' ships, tears flowed freely. Soldiers embraced one another, voices trembling with relief. Engineers cheered through broken comms, their laughter echoing across decks where moments before they had prepared for death. Captains whispered words they had not dared to believe. "We are saved." The warship's voice came again, but softer now, filled with weight rather than fury. "You thought no help was coming. You were wrong. Humanity does not forget its own." The defenders wept openly. The words were more powerful than any weapon, more healing than any shield. They had been abandoned by the galaxy, but not by humanity. The enemy, still fleeing, carried those words with them. They could not erase them, they could not deny them. Every ship that escaped carried the memory of golden light tearing through their fleets, of a voice calm and unyielding, of one ship that refused to fall. And across the galaxy, whispers spread. Stories carried from ship to ship, from station to station, from world to world. They spoke of the day humanity arrived, the day the void itself roared with their defiance. It was not conquest, it was not destruction, it was a message. The galaxy would never laugh again. The battlefield was silent now. Where once thousands of enemy warships had filled the void, only drifting wreckage remained. Fires flickered in the darkness, dying embers of an armada that had believed itself unbreakable. Carriers spun slowly, broken and powerless. Dreadnoughts floated like corpses, their cannons dark. The strongest fleet the galaxy had ever seen had been reduced to ruins. At the heart of it all, the human warship still glowed. Its vast hull pulsed with veins of golden light, steady and calm. It had moved like a storm, struck like a blade, and now it hovered in the silence like a monument. One ship, one presence, one undeniable truth. On the defenders' bridges, silence gave way to sobs of relief. Soldiers who had prepared to die wept openly, clutching one another. Engineers who had whispered prayers shouted and laughed. Captains leaned back in their seats, eyes burning with tears, unable to believe what they had seen. They had waited for death. Instead, they had witnessed salvation. The enemy survivors fled, their ships retreating into the dark, engines burning as they scrambled to escape. No orders bound them now. Pride and arrogance were gone. All that remained was fear. They carried that fear with them, etched into their memories, carved into their souls, the memory of one human ship that had broken them without mercy. The warship did not chase. It did not finish the slaughter. It simply hovered, radiant, untouchable. Its restraint spoke louder than destruction. It had chosen not to erase its enemies completely. It had chosen instead to leave witnesses, witnesses who would tell the story, across every world, every empire, every corner of the galaxy. The voice came again, steady as always, carried across every channel. You thought no help was coming. You thought we were weak, but you will remember this day. Humanity stands. Humanity fights. Humanity arrives. The words echoed through the void, unstoppable, unforgettable. They reached the ears of the fleeing, they reached the hearts of the defenders, and they reached far beyond, carried across the galaxy by broadcasts that no one could turn away from. On alien worlds, billions watched. In crowded cities, people stared at screens in silence. In distant colonies, workers froze mid-step, their eyes wide with awe. Children once told that humanity was fragile and foolish, now looked up at the sky with wonder. The galaxy had expected a joke, a failure, a tragedy. Instead, they had witnessed history. Leaders who had mocked humanity sat speechless in their chambers, their faces pale, their pride shattered. They understood what this meant. Humanity had revealed only a glimpse of its power, and it was enough to humble them all. If one ship could break the greatest fleet ever assembled, what would happen if humanity sent more? The question spread like wildfire, whispered in fear, whispered in awe. On the ground below, defenders stood beneath the night sky, watching the glowing figure of the warship above. They had been ready to die, ready to vanish without a trace. Now they stood alive, saved by a ship that should not have existed, a ship that had turned despair into pride. To them, it was not only a vessel, it was a symbol. A soldier whispered to the comrade beside him, his voice trembling. They came, humanity came. The words spread through the survivors like a chant. They came, they came, they came. And above them, the warship slowly turned. Its engines flared, light cascading across the wreckage, across the planet, across the stunned survivors. It did not linger to bask in glory. It did not wait for applause. It simply began to depart, gliding back into the void from which it had arrived. Its presence faded, but the memory did not. The defenders knew they would tell this story for the rest of their lives. The enemy knew they would never escape the shame. And the galaxy knew that humanity had stepped onto the stage in a way no one would ever forget. From that day forward, everything changed. No longer would humanity be mocked as weak. No longer would their voices be ignored. No longer would the galaxy laugh at their efforts. They had proven a truth older than the stars themselves. Humans might be few, might be underestimated, but their will was unbreakable. The void closed behind the warship as it vanished into the horizon of stars, leaving silence in its wake. But the silence was not empty. It was filled with a promise. A promise that humanity was out there. A promise that they would always arrive. The galaxy would tell the tale forever. The day when defenders waited for death. but instead saw a miracle. The day when one warship came roaring from the void. The day when humanity's roar silenced the laughter of empires. It was not the end. It was the beginning.